Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
Sponsored by A Better Route Planner. Congratulations to A Better Route Planner for reaching 10 million routes planned. And now they're releasing version 3.8, which will have better speed limits, better alternate routes, more cars, and they're bringing back the good old navigation mode. Need a better route planner? abetterrouteplanner.com.
And brought to you by Build Your Own Robot Kit, or BYOR. Bring robotics to the kids level.
And with new designs uploaded every week, you can get your EcoWare gear and help support the show. And you know, of course, that we plant a tree for every T.
And we're going to be in Austin in February for Fully Charged Live. We have a discount code so you can buy tickets for 15% off. The link is in the description down below.
So Bloomberg just did a big survey of Model 3 owners. In fact, they surveyed 5,000 Model 3 owners, and we've got a lot of data to go through here. So we thought that we'd crunch through the numbers with you guys and share with you what they've found.
So this was a 164-item questionnaire. So this is not like a, well, do you like the car? Yes, no. This is very deep, very in-depth.
This is like an SAT of surveys.
Yes. I don't think it's time limited, but certainly, people's time has to factor into this. So we're going to be talking through parts 1 through 3.
Why not part 4?
Part 4 was supposed to come out this morning for the time of recording, but they pushed it off a week. They pushed it off. Must have been on Elon time. So just keep in mind that there are over 350,000 Model 3s out on the road in the world today. And we're just talking about 5,000 Model 3 owners who filled out this survey. It's a small subset of all the Model 3 owners in the world, but it is the largest survey that we're currently aware of.
All right, so the first part of the survey is about quality and reliability. To sum it up, Bloomberg found that there was a peak in dissatisfaction around February 2019. You can see here on the chart that that's when it peaked with 101 defects per 100 cars. Now, can you explain that for a second? Because does that mean there's over one defect per car?
According to the people who filled out the survey, yes, there was a defect rate of 101%, which is definitely not good. And keep in mind when this was. So this was Q1 of this year, and that's when Tesla started shipping Model 3s to Europe and to Asia.
So Tesla had stopped delivering cars in the U.S. at that point pretty much. So this is almost all European and Chinese cars getting delivered. And keep in mind that Tesla was having problems with deliveries. They'd never put cars on ships in these numbers before. And so there were a lot of cars showing up with little minor usually exterior paint issues, chips, scratches, dents, and some panel gap problems.
And this is what the survey showed, that basically most of these complaints were small exterior paint issues, chips and scratches and dents.
Now, we have a lot of experience with this because, as a YouTube channel, we get contacted by people when they're either happy or unhappy with their deliveries. And a lot of times we'll say, well, send us a picture of what you're unhappy with. And a lot of times what you're unhappy with when you pick up your car is that it's not absolutely showroom perfect. And I get that. You're putting down a lot of money on a car. But I think when the average person hears about, oh my gosh, scratches and chips, this is horrible.
Right.
They're not realizing that most of these problems are things that are pretty much unnoticeable. They could be in the trunk area. They could be in a door well. They could be really low on the car. Someplace that maybe if you drove off the lot within 10 minutes, you'd be getting a little scratch or a chip there anyway.
Now, the next part of the survey talked about service and charging. So let's first talk about service. The majority of people are satisfied with Tesla service, especially mobile service.
Yeah.
And I can attest to this. I mean, getting mobile service, you feel like you are like a hot ticket because guy comes to your place of work or where you live, fixes it right in the driveway or the parking lot, and then is on their way. You didn't have to, schedule to have a friend come drive you to any kind of service center to drop off the car and then drive you to work and then drive you back to the service center. So I can totally see why most people are very happy with mobile service.
Not only that, but they're always, I've never heard of any other story where they're not the most super duper people in the world. Like they're always super friendly, super knowledgeable, so that even if they can't solve your problem or something, you don't get that situation where, we're kind of used to with a lot of mechanics where it's like, yeah, what's the problem? They're always super nice
and super professional. Absolutely. And you can see that the customer service online and the customer service by phone is nowhere near as close to the mobile service fleet because the sad thing here is that there's no comparison.
Right.
So my first car that I ever owned, owned, I think it was a Nissan Xterra. And the first time I had to get it repaired, I remember calling the repair shop, and I still remember this. It was the most jarring and stressful experience I've ever had. You call them and you just get the what do you want? And maybe this is just a Massachusetts thing. Maybe but I've never had a pleasant experience. You go in, you drop off the car, you have to fill out all of the paperwork and everything like that. I wouldn't rate it very satisfied, right? It's not like traditional auto manufacturers have made this part of the process this, smooth and wonderful experience. So I think that a side-by-side comparison, it might be frustrating to have to deal with Tesla service online. It is nice to do it in an app. I know that I'm a millennial and I don't like talking to people because, basically all of us have social anxiety. I don't know why that is. But regardless, it's nice to be able to just write it all into an app. It's written down. You're not telling someone over the phone who maybe is writing it down or maybe is just talking to you. And so the data shows that most people are pretty satisfied with online and phone service.
I just would have liked to have seen Bloomberg have a side-by-side. It's great to have data, but unless you can put it in context, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So it would have been great to show here's how people thought of the Model 3 service, and here's how people thought of the Porsche service or the Audi service.
Because this is the only car that Bloomberg has ever done anything for. Now, I understand why. It's a very new and influential car, but it would be cool to have some side-by-side comparison. Now, let's take a look at not just the satisfaction, but satisfaction over time.
Yeah, Bloomberg says dissatisfaction on the rise. And what is this showing us? What's the first chart showing us?
Basically, the way that it looks is that repair shops are starting to get full of Model 3s. So that pushes out the timelines, and it means that these places are rushing, and they might not necessarily be fixing everything to customer satisfaction. Now, it's important to note here that these service appointments aren't necessarily from delivery, that these can be from, I backed into my tree, I dinged it, I scratched up the side of my car against a bush.
Right, I need to put winter tires on it. It is a little confusing because if you're looking at this oh my gosh, this is all because of, problems with the car.
Right.
No, every car needs to be brought in for service from time to time for whatever reason.
And there's just more and more Teslas. Now, Elon has tweeted out that service center expansion is at max speed. So they are trying to put as many repair shops, qualified repair shops, out in the world as possible. But as we can see here, they're not necessarily 100% keeping up with demand. And that's a useful statistic.
So there's 3 charts coming up here under service and charging. The first one is showing average service appointments per 100 cars. And it looks like a pretty good trend.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's going down. So as more cars get put on the road, a smaller and smaller percentage of them need to get serviced.
So as Tesla ramps up production of the Model 3, they're fixing things on the line. They're finding out what the problems are. They're getting feedback from customers, and they're actually able to make the lines to put out a higher quality car.
Yep.
The panel gaps are getting tighter. We've heard this. We just recently went to a collision repair shop here in Massachusetts where they work on dozens and dozens of Teslas. And what we heard was, the tolerances are getting better. The quality is getting better. They're learning. Let's be honest here, folks. They're pumping out a brand new model car, and they're not like the big auto manufacturers who have had decades to get this right. They've had just a few years to get this right.
Right. So then the next graph we're looking at here is lost time after crash. And so you can see that this is coming down from 41 days down to about 18 days.
The white bar is the days waiting for parts, and the blue bar is the days while the car is unavailable. So basically, they follow pretty much in a line together.
Yeah, and as you can see, that has actually been decreasing, which is a really good indicator that Tesla is ramping up production of spare parts that they're going to need for crash Teslas, and that basically service centers are getting even better and better at doing that work.
And we just heard this ourselves from an auto body place, which said that Tesla is rolling out a new program where they're trying to get at least half the parts out within 24 hours. And then the third chart here is, this one's not so great. This is get in line. So this is the time that you have to wait for your service appointment.
So the interesting part here is that waiting for your parts and waiting to have your car fixed, that time is going down, and the number of cars that need to be serviced is also going down, but the wait times are still increasing. Now, that is simply a product of the production of the Model 3. There are so many Teslas going out on the road that even though a smaller portion of them are getting into accidents or need service, and even though the service centers are getting faster and faster at getting the parts and fixing them, there are still enough cars that it is starting to gum up the system. And so Tesla really does need to focus on getting more service centers.
And more Ranger services. Yeah. So the next part of the survey was asking about people's happiness with charging. This first chart is weird because they labeled it as satisfaction with charging options, and yet the 3 questions all had to do with superchargers, almost like they didn't understand what superchargers are.
But I mean, take a look at this data. Basically, everyone is satisfied with superchargers. A 4.5 out of 5 is a really good score, and that's for, both availability, affordability, and supercharger speeds.
Now, what I want to talk about here is that most of these survey people were surveyed soon after they got their cars. And I would argue that when you buy a normal car, a normal ICE car, 30 days after you bought it, you pretty much know everything you need to know about the car. You've used the windshield wipers, you've gone to a gas station.
And you've been to a gas station before you bought the car, most likely.
Exactly. You know about the procedure. But with the Tesla, 30 days after you bought the car, you may not still fully understand supercharging. I know I didn't, because you need to kind of go on a road trip with it and do some serious supercharging to get to appreciate it. So to ask that question, you might be getting a lot of people who are like, yeah, I don't know, it's whatever, instead of being like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Or you have people who say, well, there isn't a supercharger within a 30-mile radius of me, so therefore it's not useful. But as soon as they need to travel outside of that 30-mile radius, they're going to be using superchargers along their route. And I think that the most important thing to nail down with this chart is that supercharging is not a gimmick. It is not the kind of thing where it's like, oh, it's this fancy thing, but you're never going to use it. People use supercharging, and it is extremely useful, and it is extremely strategically placed in order to get people around in their Teslas.
That's a really good point, because, I know that on most car dealership lots, when you go in there, they throw around all these terminologies of things like, oh, we've got the Ford suction file.
And the clear coat underbody spray.
Right, and things that you were like, oh, okay. And then you leave the lot and you never hear about it again because it's not a real thing.
Superchargers are things that you hardly even hear at the showrooms, and yet that's what's really going to make the difference owning this car is the supercharger network.
But, when we were just recently at this auto body place and they see lots of Teslas and talk to lots of owners, they said that many owners had never supercharged. So that means that a lot of these people on this survey who probably put down like neutral or whatever because they didn't know much about it, it's only because they didn't know much about it. And then the next part of this chart here is, again, more satisfaction with charging options. I feel like they had a typo because this is talking about kind of all the different pieces. So let's look at the first one here, charging convenience versus gasoline cars.
4.67. That's really, really good. You would expect that if it were equal or on par, that we would be looking at a 2.5.
Right.
A 4.67 means that it is more convenient to be charging your car than it is to fill up a gas tank.
And this is the biggest problem people have with EVs that they say before they buy one. They're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to charge it.
Right. It takes so long to charge. You sleep. And if we look at the answers for people who primarily use a home charger, you can see that number goes up to 4.75.
Wow.
That is a very high rate. People who use a work charger, we're talking about, again, a 4.5. People who only rely on superchargers are down at a 3.91. Now, using a supercharger to charge your car all the time is not the way it was intended to work.
No. A supercharger is supposed to get you on long distance travel. It's not supposed to be your everyday choice.
Right. So I can understand that if you're stuck in some kind of situation where your apartment won't let you charge your car and you have to go to a supercharger that's maybe 10, 15 miles away, that's going to be inconvenient for you.
And that's why Tesla has installed urban superchargers, which charge at 72 kilowatts, better for your battery. And that way you can, if you're in a city, charge there more often without hurting your battery.
So this next chart we're looking at is design and performance. So this is talking about basically all of the different aspects of driving the car and what you think of the look. And look at this.
Driving enjoyment
at a 4.97. Okay, we're talking about 5,000 people. 4.97 means that, statistically speaking, we're probably looking at more misclicks than people who don't like driving the car.
Right.
Then if we look at basically everything else, battery range at a 4.9, interior appearance exterior appearance, brakes, seats, storage space, climate, view of the road, and interior materials all rated above a 4.5.
Yeah.
That is super impressive. I mean, Porsche, look out.
But this isn't even Tesla's top of the line car.
Exactly. This is Tesla's like bottom of the barrel practically. I mean, these are the cheapest. These are the cheapest cars that Tesla sells. And so to have this level of satisfaction with all drivers, driving enjoyment, because people can talk about performance all they want, right? They could say, "Oh, but the Porsche you can throw it around, it's so much lighter." Driving enjoyment is really an important factor to consider when you're talking about driving a car, because let's face it, you don't buy a car to put it onto a racetrack every day and throw it around a bunch of corners. You're going to be driving it on public roads, public streets, public highways.
Yeah, that's the work.
That's the majority of what everyone is doing. So driving enjoyment is super duper important, and to have it at a 4.97.
I know. This is again where I'd like to see Bloomberg just show us some numbers for some other car companies, because I don't think you'd see numbers like this.
Yeah. Oh, I want to see the Prius. I want to see the Corolla. I want to see the Civic. I want to see BMWs.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. You have the survey, and clearly you have the technology to compile it. You could be, throwing out one of these every month if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So let's get to the next graph, which is features. Again, very, very highly rated features here. We're talking over-the-air updates, 4.87, extremely high. People are very satisfied with over-the-air updates.
And just to point out, this is a feature that no other car has. Now, like Porsche Taycan has announced that they have over-the-air updates coming soon, but they're not the same kind of update. They're not something you're going to notice as an owner of the car.
Right. It's not going to be, oh, now you have YouTube and Netflix on your car, or we put a new game on your car.
Right. Or now you can auto-summon your car.
Exactly. That, I think, is why that is rated so highly, is because people actually have seen the value of their car go up.
And this is within owning the car for just a month or two.
Right. Next, we're looking at touchscreen controls. That's amazing. I mean, we're talking, that's phone level of touchscreen control satisfaction. Because if you've been in any other car with a touchscreen, I'm pretty sure you can agree, it's pretty lackluster.
Right.
You get that kind of like, where you push it in, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not really a touch screen. It's like you really are touching it. It's not some magical screen that knows everything.
Right.
Sound system, I honestly expected that to be higher. Sound system in my car makes me cry sometimes.
I know. It makes me cry, and I'm like 100 feet from the car.
I mean, I will be listening to, like the Star Wars soundtrack, which if you haven't listened to in a Model 3, it gives it so much more depth. Seriously, sound system. Let's go on to maps and directions. Obviously, you have a huge screen in the car.
Can I go back to maps and directions?
Yeah.
Once you've driven in a Tesla and then you get into your friend's car, you're like,
where are we?
How are we going to get there?
Yeah. And the other thing that I love about having a giant map next to me is that I can explore so much better. When I like type in a destination and we're like, okay, we're going there, instead of just being like, all right, we'll take the highway and then we'll get off and then we'll drive the main road, I can be like, oh, we'll just take this road, then this road, then this road, then this road, then this road, drive a path that I've never driven before, even though it's only 5 miles from my house.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have never been down this street before. Look at that beautiful house. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful drive this is.
On every other car, to get in and out of a map, you have to, hit a plus button and wait, and then a minus button and wait.
Right. To be able to just zoom out.
Like, wow.
And to be able to see things from the satellite view of like, what kind of building is that?
Yeah.
Let's go find out. That is so much fun, and it adds so much to the car. Phone app. I think that a lot of people don't fully know how to use their phone app.
Yeah.
But again, it's rated at 4.57.
What other cars? There's some other cars that have phone apps, but generally you can't do anything with them other than maybe start your car
and unlock
your car. Mm-hmm. So it's weird here that people wouldn't give this just a 5 out of 5, because you can do so much more with this phone app. You can now summon your car out of a parking space, or if you have full self-driving, you can auto-summon the car to you.
Right. And talking about features that no other car has, Sentry Mode. No other car has it. You can even put a dash cam in your car. It's not going to do everything that Sentry Mode can do.
Right.
Automatic windshield wipers, that one I would fall into the neutral or the slightly somewhat dissatisfied thing. I understand.
But unlike being stuck with it for a certain model of your car, this is improving.
They're getting better. Like, as I've owned it, it has been getting better. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better. Next is voice commands. And this is something that
I have nothing to complain about with voice commands. I can say words that I'm like, there's no way it's going to get that, because you'll give it some name and then it gets it. And
right. You can say the name of a restaurant and it will find it and it will take you there. Now, I can't, give it voice commands to adjust the climate control or to open a website on the browser or anything like that. And that is where I think that there is a lot of room for improvement. But again, most cars don't have too many other voice commands.
So this next chart is pretty interesting. First of all, because it's not really a chart. They just threw it looks like a lot of blue dots on a...
Blue dots would have been a little bit more helpful than a bunch of squares, different colored squares.
Well, what is this showing us?
This is showing us battery degradation. I think the only thing that you can really glean from this is that orange dotted line, which is the kind of average battery degradation of the Model 3 over miles.
And so the other line below it is Model S.
Correct.
But that's the 2014.
That's the 2014 Model S. You'll notice that the Model 3 is better than the 2014. Now, they're getting this Model S data from the Dutch-Belgium Tesla Forum. So it's not going to have quite as many data points as the Model 3. So that comparison is a little wonky. And it says that the Model 3 retains battery capacity better than older generation electric cars. But they're only comparing it to Teslas. So they really should have said compared to older Teslas,
right? Because if you put a Leaf on here, you're going to see a curve that's going to go whoa.
Completely different story. My Leaf is at about 80,000 miles, and it's at about 80% battery capacity, which isn't even on this graph.
Right, it'd be down here at the bottom.
So if that's any indication at how good the Model 3 battery degradation is, that would have been a much better comparison, in my opinion.
But look at that orange line for a second, and look at about 25,000 miles and on. It's flat.
Exactly.
So, I mean, yes, you're getting battery degradation as you'd expect, but then it just flattens out. And it flattens out at about 97%.
Right. And it's important to keep in mind that there's a reason that Tesla has so low battery degradation, and that is the battery management system.
Right.
Okay? It's keeping the temperatures of your batteries at safe levels to prevent degradation. It's preventing too fast charging speeds. It's charging it very efficiently, very smart. So even if you are supercharging, which definitely wears on the battery a lot more than regular charging, it's still better than most other car brands have been able to come out with.
Right.
And that's, again, because Tesla's been working on this for so long.
Now, their section on Autopilot, and they said, we asked 5,000 Model 3 owners about Tesla's software for automated driving on highways and parking lots. More than 90% said the feature makes them safer. So think about that for a second. Tesla's come up with a feature that no one else has, that 90%, 9 out of 10 of their customers says makes them feel safer.
Right. Here, and then they go on and they said that 13% of owners say Autopilot has put them in a dangerous situation. But then in the same area, they say that 28% say that Autopilot has saved them from a dangerous situation.
So I want to put this in perspective, because a lot of people reading this Bloomberg article won't have a Tesla yet, and they're not understanding. They're like, oh my gosh, 13% of owners says it put them in a dangerous situation.
And dangerous situation is a very, very vague term, especially when we're talking about Autopilot, which people have never experienced before.
So I would like to liken Autopilot to letting your 16-year-old drive your car, and many times they'll put you in a dangerous situation. Ralph will be driving along, and he'll take a turn too fast, and you'll be like, whoa, Ralph! In this case, Ralph is driving, let's say, in your lap so that you can grab the steering wheel and the brake. And so you just take over for Ralph. That's what Autopilot is.
And that's what your job is. That's what you are supposed to do, is when you're in Autopilot, you are still the driver. The car is driving itself, but you are supposed to take over if there is a problem.
Now look at this data chart they gave us next, which is this big complicated blocks system of blue and pink and red. And what are these? These are different stories that people have?
These are all different experiences that people have had. The blue ones, obviously, very good. The orange ones are bad. And the deep orange ones, there are only 3, are actual accidents. So let's pull up these 3 different ones. So let's start with the first one here.
Okay. I fell asleep behind the wheel. I was traveling across a highway interchange at relatively slow speeds. The car kept me in the lane centered, but the car in front of me veered to the right side of the lane, and I think the radar locked onto the car in front of them and accelerated. I hit the driver's side of their bumper with the passenger side of my car. And he gave it 4 stars.
He gave Autopilot 4 stars. He fell asleep.
Oh, yeah, that was the first sentence.
He fell asleep behind the wheel. Now, let me just ask you what happens if you fall asleep behind the wheel in any other car.
You are toast.
You're toast. You're going to either hit something or you're going to fly off the road. There's not too many other options. Most cars don't detect that you're sleeping and they don't drive themselves. So you're basically just in an unguided ground missile that's going to hit something.
Yeah, let's go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Failed to slow sufficiently for tight bend, crossed center line, hit a truck. 4 stars.
Again, if you were driving
Ralph,
the car,
yeah,
right.
if Ralph is taking the turn too fast, you take over for Ralph. You don't watch as Ralph takes the turn too fast. Hey, what are you doing there, Ralph? Wait, are you smashing into a truck? Let me see.
The brakes are right there. The steering wheel's right there. You're sitting in the frickin' driver's seat. You can take over. So again, sure, should Autopilot have smashed into a truck? No, but is it Autopilot's full responsibility to drive the car 100%? No. And that's right. You can't drive Autopilot without accepting something that basically makes you read something that tells you that is not what Autopilot is supposed to do. So it is your responsibility to take over if you're going over the line.
And the third and final one here, Autopilot was engaged. I wasn't paying attention. False sense of security is one issue that comes with Autopilot. All owners must be and not get complacent. Someone pulled in front of me and the car ran right into them. 3 stars.
So in all 3 of these cases, the driver was either not paying attention or didn't take over when they noticed something was wrong.
Or asleep.
And so those are the only 3 cases that they've found where Autopilot actually hit something. It again is not a driver yet. It is a driver assistance feature, and you are supposed to be monitoring it and taking over. When I'm in Autopilot, I'm constantly taking over for it. It's not because I know that it's going to hit a car. It's because I'm cautious. And that is the way that everyone should be driving, is cautiously.
It's a computer on wheels, and we call it that for a reason. And anyone who's used to computers knows that you can't completely rely on software, especially when it's beta software, which is what this is. And especially when the computer programmers tell you not to rely on it.
Let's go on to some actual aggregated data here.
Okay.
So let's look at Autopilot safety. So it gets a 4.49 average score. Awesome. Most people are very satisfied with Autopilot safety. They are thinking that the car is doing it very safe.
And again, this is soon after buying the car, and I would argue that most people need a bunch of days driving nonstop with Autopilot before you start to really get it. I mean, it took my father 6 days of driving nonstop across country before he fully understood it and then loved it.
Right.
The first 5 days, he was afraid of it.
And honestly, it's always going to be scary the first few times you turn it on. It's going to be terrifying because you have never experienced anything like this before.
Right.
Let's go on to the next one. I don't exactly know what Autopilot means since we just covered Autopilot safety, but it got rated slightly lower at a 4.43. Full self-driving got even lower. I don't know what that means.
Because the cars aren't full self-driving.
Fully self-driving isn't a feature. So again, I don't know what they're talking about. Then navigate on Autopilot reliability. I would agree with this number, a 3.89. I would agree. The drive on nav, it's not perfect yet. It's definitely amazing. It's not something that I would rely on to get me to a destination because let's face it, it's not necessarily drive on nav's fault. A lot of highways are built really stupid.
And phantom braking, I think, is one reason, which Bloomberg brings up next, as to why people may not give the highest marks yet to Autopilot. So Bloomberg says, a driver from Florida reported an experience of inexplicable braking by the Autopilot feature on his Model 3. An instant later, the vehicle ahead swerved out of the lane to reveal a stopped car. Tesla's sensors had detected the upcoming hazard and acted without human input to avert a crash.
This was before this driver actually realized it appeared to be phantom braking. And this does happen. So let's explain what phantom braking is. This is when you're driving along, everything seems to be normal, and for whatever reason, the car applies stiff braking to the car. So you're driving along, and all of a sudden it goes, woo, and you're like slowing down. And most of the times, you kind of have to take over. You have to basically slam on the accelerator. It's nice that you have the acceleration so that the person behind you doesn't ram into you because you're stopping for what seems like no reason. We don't know exactly why this happens. I'm not a software expert here. It could have to do with a radar ping that correlates with some change in the road surface. It often seems to happen when there's shadows. And people who experience this in Autopilot this is usually what turns them off to it. And they say, oh, I don't want to use it because it sometimes it phantom brakes.
I do the same thing. So, yes. I mean, I'm a cautious driver, and sometimes I'll be thinking a lot about like deer. It's evening, and I'll be like, okay, be on the alert for deer. Be on the alert. And then, after a few minutes of being on the alert, you're kind of, everything's fine again. And then just something will catch your eye, and you'll be like, whoa! And it was nothing. It wasn't a deer. But your brain was just like being super cautious. And so that's kind of what it's doing. It's being super duper cautious, which, yeah, it's not fun if you're a passenger in the car to be like thrown around for no reason. But like we all as humans do that too.
Right. And it's important to realize that this is an evasive maneuver that could, in the case of this Florida driver, be preventing a crash. It does have sensors that are doing a lot more than what your eyes can do because it has radar. You do not have radar in your head. You can't be looking for metal in front of you. It's just something that doesn't happen.
In today's society, we all drive horrifically close to one another. Mm-hmm. If you were to take video footage of, the 405 in LA and show it to someone from, let's say, the 1930s, I think they would faint.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason that we should be driving this close. It's just that if we don't drive this close, our society will fall apart. You'll never get home. So,
that society will fall apart. It's just
no, pretty much. I mean, the highway system is designed so that you have to keep the steady flow going, or else no one could get home on time. If you actually gave the amount of space you should give between the car in front of you, it would feel weird. Like everyone would be like, what's going on? And people would just cut you off and it would fill that space up.
Right.
But if you had that much space in front of you and you phantom braked or you just decided to come to a complete halt on the highway, there would be no accidents because everyone would have time to react.
Well, and also if people were not texting and if they weren't drinking and if they weren't high and if they weren't just nodding off or just being humans and having only two eyes that always look in the same direction and just not being able to see everything and not having great reaction times, which is completely different than the Tesla. It actually does have better sensors, more cameras, and faster reaction times than we do.
That's a good point. I mean, when you're letting your 16-year-old drive the car, as I call it, that 16-year-old is not going to be texting.
It's this not texting, radar-enabled, multi-eyed 16-year-old
who's always paying attention. All right, so the next part of the survey is about Smart Summon, and 70% of owners say that Smart Summon is a useful feature.
And 41% say it is reliable enough for the average driver. Now, I don't exactly know what that means, reliable enough. It's nothing that you really ever need to depend on.
No, this is, a brand new feature, and you're supposed to, let's just remind ourselves, you have a dead man switch on the app. You have to be holding your finger on that. And you're supposed to be paying close attention.
You can't initiate Smart Summon unless you're within a certain radius. I believe it's about 250 feet.
If your car does anything wrong, it's on you because you weren't supposed to initiate it if there was any question. And while it's in operation going super slow, I might add, you just take your finger off, the car comes to a complete stop.
Anything that strikes the car is pretty much going to have to be moving itself.
And let me also stress, this wasn't a feature that they rolled out and it's like, your 2019 Model 3, this is how it will do auto summon for the rest of time. This is the beginning. This is the baby version of it.
It's the first rollout of it.
Right. It's going to get better.
And it's already at 70%. So let's take a look at some data here. 75% of people say that it navigates well, which is pretty impressive again for a new feature. Yep. Avoids pedestrians, 95%.
And Jesse can attest to that because he runs in front of it all the time.
I jump in front of the car and it stops every single time. Avoids other cars, 90%. Stops immediately, 98%. So if there was any question that the dead man switch works, that's it. Limitations clearly explained. 81% of people say that that's true. And so I would say that that's pretty fair.
It is.
81% of people, you can put all the directions you want on any product. And if you got 81% of the people reading it, I think that would be a pretty successful little label you had there. So let's talk about this survey in general. Okay, it's first of all, it's very helpful to gauge people's response and reactions to the Tesla Model 3, and on the whole, extraordinarily positive. Again, we don't have a comparison to any other car on the road. We do not have a 5,000 applicant, 167 point survey for any other car. If for every one of these data points, it's just one data point and we have nothing else to compare it to.
But you know what was going through my head the whole time was that this is Bloomberg. And we know, unfortunately, that Bloomberg has been very fuddy when it comes to Tesla. So I had to take a lot of this data with a grain of salt. I mean, even though it was almost all positive, I was like, would it have been even more positive had they read the data differently? And this is to my point here. So near the end of section 3, they've got all these data points floating around. And if you hover over one of them, up comes a box. And this is what some owner said about the car.
But that's how they organize the data in this very confusing. All these boxes, by the way, are moving. I took a snapshot of it, but they're all moving.
Except for some of them.
Except for the 3 crashes, which we already read through, and in which case all drivers weren't paying attention and taking over.
They keep those crashes on screen all the time.
Static. They're always on top, and they're always not moving. And they're orange on a blue and light orange backdrop.
So we took a look at some of the statements made by people to see if, well, did they really fall in the right category?
So here are 7 of them. So this is talking about Smart Summon.
I testing it by using Smart Summon to pull the car out of my garage to my location in my driveway, and the car tried to turn too early towards me, hitting front right quarter panel against the side of my garage, causing minor damage to the car.
So again, in this case, that sucks that the car did that. You do have the dead man switch.
Right. Given it is clearly noted as beta release, I feel like your questions are assuming way too much. Why'd they stick that in this section?
Why is this an answer? This is clearly a piece of feedback.
I like it, but seems a little gimmicky.
So this, again, is in the slightly dissatisfied section of owners.
But he likes it.
He likes it. He just doesn't think that there's too much use for it.
I only tested it in a giant empty lot.
Yet it's in a slightly dissatisfied category. Why?
It's scary, and from a faraway angle, hard to determine if it's doing the right thing.
You're too far away from the car.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're supposed to clearly be able to see the car.
So this is someone who's not using it properly. Now, a useful data point maybe, but one that you should include in your data set, I don't know.
Limited experience so far. Only used it a couple of times in a test environment.
Again, we're not getting... And I know that this is all surveys, right? So you can't have a survey with 100% great data. But, I mean, if you're going to release a survey with 167 data points, and according to them, they got over 500,000 words of feedback, which, in their words, meant enough to fill the first 4 Harry Potter books, shouldn't you be reading through some of these? Shouldn't you be throwing away some of the crappy data that you get? I mean, right. Okay, a Harry Potter book, wow, gee, that's a lot of reading. But you're Bloomberg, right?
Yeah,
you have people, and a Harry Potter book does seem daunting. When I was 10, I was reading a Harry Potter book a night. To say, like, so much words. It's not that much words. You're Bloomberg. You have people who you pay to read through this stuff.
But I got to wonder, I mean, did they put some interns on this and they just put them in the wrong categories? Because, I mean, this next one, it's better than many humans I know. Alas, that's damning with faint praise. Okay, so you just got through saying it's better than many humans you know, so why are you in the dissatisfied category?
What's the bar here?
Right.
What are you expecting the car to do?
You wanted it to be better than all humans you know and all cars you know? Like what?
Overall, I'm super glad that we have all this data. I'm super glad that we can cull through it and not just look at all the aggregated points, but actually get in and see how some of the data points might be a little skewed.
What I want to know from you guys is if you put on your glasses of being just a normal person who didn't know much about Tesla and you read these articles, would you feel that it was like, oh, this is an exciting car, I want to know more, or would you be scared?
Because the way that the articles are written, the way that they present some of the data, it is skewed. It is slightly off of how a scientific, a completely unbiased person would write about it. And if you're going to be an unbiased source, you need to explain the data. You need to show that this is impressive. And by having no other car manufacturer comparison of like, here's a satisfaction rate, they didn't pull any other. Right. You know, there are other measurements of satisfaction rates with other car brands.
Right. JD Powers is full of data. They could have, listed some data from other cars.
Right. So all you have to do is say, here is our source. It's JD Power. Here are the satisfaction reports. Here's Porsche. Here's VW. Here's Ford. Here's GM. Put them all together so that we can see and see for ourselves exactly what it is. The way that this is framed is just a little problematic for me. I know that I love Tesla. I know that I'm biased. And I think that if you're watching this, you probably know that we're a little biased. So you can add as much salt as you want to this. And you could say, okay, I understand that these guys might have their opinions based on, this car. But when Bloomberg comes out with it, they're not called Tesla Time News. They're called Bloomberg. Okay? They don't have a horse in this race, or at least they shouldn't, because they are a big, huge media empire.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head there. I mean, a media empire has to pay for itself. We get paid by you guys, our patrons,
right?
And that's why we're independent. We're an independent news source that tries to bring you news about what's going on in the world that affects all of us. And we don't let oil companies pay for it. So therefore, you're not hearing what oil companies want us to say.
Right.
Bloomberg, last time I checked, they had ads from all sorts of big companies, and I got to imagine that somehow filters into the reporting.
Right. So, again, we're just trying to counteract some of the FUD that was mixed into these articles and even into the surveys themselves. But overall, even if you just take the surveys carte blanche,
I think it looks pretty phenomenal.
It's extraordinarily phenomenal, and this is just great Thanksgiving conversation. Put a couple of these numbers down, maybe write them down on your hand or on a napkin, and that way when you're having conversations at the dinner table, people are saying, Tesla, no, the Autopilot, it's too dangerous, and you say, well, actually, 90% of people think that it makes them safer. That's a pretty useful statistic coming from 5,000 people.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on In Depth. We'll see you next week.
Now you know.